Hey, I wanted to talk to. Oh, hey. I wanted to talk today about. That's the peekaboo fallacy. I wanted to talk today about. Hold on, this is not going to work. I wanted to make a really quick video connecting fallacies and biases to how we view our own self and our self-esteem, because I think there's a connection there. I don't want to make a whole video about self-esteem and what it is and where it comes from. I'll maybe do that at another time. For today, let's just focus on 5 fallacies and how they connect to self-esteem. 1, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, if you don't know what it is that it basically just means you believe something because it confirms something you already believe. So if I believe that I'm a really kind of bad person and I have all these flaws, then I'm going to be primed to see things in my environment and my behavior and people's reactions to me that can make me feel like, oh, that confirms, yeah, I'm clearly a bad person. I'm clearly worthless because look, the cashier didn't even make eye contact with me, or my loved ones don't even call me. And it's maybe, but there could be other explanations, right? I think confirmation bias is one of the most common problems with self-esteem, because once you start getting bad self-esteem, it's very natural to look for things that confirm your beliefs. And so it's very hard to tear yourself out of that. And it can't always be helpful. It's not always helpful when someone says to you, well, that's not true. Or think about the other explanations. It's something that you really have to develop for yourself. Number 2, recency bias. This is a really interesting one. We're biased towards believing something about something because it's the most recent experience we've had with that thing. So this can come into play with self-esteem because say my most recent experience is of myself feeling like I'm not good enough, that can be an overwhelming sense of maybe that's the defining trait about who I am. And to bring up the same point from number 1 again, it isn't always helpful for someone else to say, well, think about that time you felt really good about yourself, or think about those other, because sometimes you need to be organically brought to that place. You can't just be pulled out of your immediate self-critical mode. So it really takes a delicate art of listening and helping guide someone towards the fact that they are being biased. Almost never in a therapy session am I going to say to someone, that's some recency bias. If I think it's useful, I totally will use the term, because I think it helps to define someone's experience, to say, oh, this is a fallacy. This is something we all experience, in our thinking. But what I'm saying is you can't just point that out if it's not the right time and expect that alone is going to change someone's mind. You would only want to point it out in a situation where it directly applies and you can tell it will help explain that person's experience of themselves. You don't point out a bias or a fallacy just to sort of try to trick someone into believing something different. It's people have to realize oh, I totally am. So something I would do is maybe were there times you didn't view yourself in that way? Or I'm curious, what's an example of a time where you felt really good about yourself? And you have to do it in a way that doesn't sound like you're trying to change the subject, because, it's important for people to be able to balance the bad about themselves with the good. My goal is not to make everyone feel amazing about themselves. That would be nice, but it's a little bit of a silly goal. It's to help people have an accurate view of themselves. See the good, see the bad. And so, you don't want to look at just the recent things. You want to look at the overall experience. Anyways, recency bias. On to the next one. Number 3, authority bias. This is a good one. This is a common one. You have the tendency to believe something because it's said by a figure of authority, like your dad, your mom, a really cool guy in a chair talking into a microphone with a plant next to him. Authorities can really change the way we view ourselves, and it's very important to be able to develop your own authority, your own authorship of yourself and your experience. We don't get to randomly decide if we're good or bad because, we have to look at the evidence and stuff. I don't believe people are good or bad. I don't believe that's a useful concept. But I'm saying we're always going to have to look at the experience. But we get confused when we let authority figures guide our exploration of the evidence towards only this or that. No, you're not good enough. You're not valuable because an authority figure said that you didn't have this form of value. You weren't able to do these things. It's okay, well, cool. That's great for that authority figure. They can judge themselves by that standard. Is that how you, as the author of yourself and your experience, want to be judging yourself? Or do you maybe, want to find a standard that's more fitting for yourself? And again, the goal is not always to be super thrilled about who you are. You want to mix being self-critical with self-compassionate. But authority bias can be quite a doozy. Okay, on to the next one. Number 4, fundamental attribution errors. I don't know if this is considered a fallacy, but it seems like one to me. I'm including it. This is such a doozy. I actually just remembered this phrasing and that this means this thing, but I've thought about the idea, all the time it comes up. But this is when we think that it defines a being, an organism, a creature, an identity to have them do this or that. Basically taking someone's behaviors, taking your own behaviors, and saying that they are fundamental to who you are. You're attributing the behaviors to yourself, and it's an error because do you really know what's fundamental about yourself? Do you really know what's unchangeable about yourself? I find it quite hard to know those things. Not that they don't exist, but that I really try to make sure I have evidence if I'm assuming that I'm greedy or I don't care about people's feelings. I am very self-critical sometimes, but I want to do it in a valid way, in a way that I can trust myself. So it's important to not necessarily jump to conclusions of attributing qualities to yourself when they could really just be qualities of behaviors. What is the self? That's a topic for another video. The 5th and last fallacy is ad hominems. I thought this was a funny way to end it because in a way, when you're being hard on yourself unnecessarily and you're damaging your own view of yourself, your esteem of yourself, it's like you're doing an ad hominem attack. And it's oh, how could I do something good when I'm a bad person? That's I feel like that's one of the more common forms of how we criticize ourselves unnecessarily. And so it's funny to think of you doing an ad hominem attack on yourself. People never talk about that as far as I've seen. But I think it helps because, we're not 2 different people. We're not 5 different people. But we're not one person. It's very confusing what a person is and how many of them are inside of you. So really, we have to be very careful with what we're sort of attributing to who we are and what we're attributing to circumstances. And that doesn't mean letting ourselves off the hook for everything. But it also doesn't mean putting ourselves on the hook for everything. So thanks for watching my very short video. I hope I kept you interested. I hope I got you thinking about how logic sort of interacts with the way you view yourself and your self-esteem. If you really like this video, check out the other videos. You can support the channel by giving me money on Patreon and listening to some extra content like cool music I make and stuff like that. I'm working on a little EP that I think I'm going to put on there really soon. Might do visuals for it, probably gonna. They're really good songs. I have good self-esteem. And so you can do that, or you can check out the videos. I have one about Michael Scott that involves logic if you really like logical stuff, but I like talking about this stuff in a lot of my videos. So check them out, send them to your friends, your family, your loved ones, your enemies. And thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your night, day, or what's the other one? It's after something. After news. God, I am such a terrible person. I can't remember that word. I am literally a very, very bad person because of that.